I don't know if this is the best answer, but since it's the first one, I'm going to go with that one. I would say cut the warm up, because the first piece of copy that I had written, I think I had written about 6 or 7 pages of copy, which at the time was like giving birth, because it was a lot. I had no idea what I was doing. And that to me seemed like I had to do a lot of research, and I wrote it all up, and I didn't know whether I would be able to finish writing a promotion, which at the time were like 16 to 24 pages. I mean, now I can do that in my sleep, but I wrote it, and Bill, a mentor common to all three of us, came over, and he cut 6 of the 7 pages and handed it back to me and said, start there.
Welcome to The Fix. Sit down with copywriting experts Nick O'Connor and Glenn Fisher as they review, discuss, and improve real-world copy sent in by you. This is The Fix.
I think now, I think about that now because, for one, I think it makes me think more about how to begin, how to engage people, and how to kind of start the conversation in progress. But also because even now I do plenty of warm up, and you kind of can't get to the good spot without doing a lot of material that you're going to cut away.
It is hard, isn't it, actually, figuring out not just opening lines. All opening lines are hard. Whether you're writing an email, a tricky email, you're writing a short story, or whatever. It's always difficult to know where to start. But not just the words, but like where in the idea to drop the reader in, because the temptation to clear your voice, that's how I describe that when you're warming up. And it's like you're sort of getting yourself ready. It's very, very hard, because I think it's a human characteristic. We waffle when we begin things. We don't go straight to the point. Most people in conversation don't do that.
Right.
How do you get around? How do you talk me through your process when you're trying to get around that?
Well, for me, it's there is definitely the point where there's voice clearing, and there's sort of, you're waiting for your confidence to build enough so that you can step into it, or you're waiting to kind of step out of yourself enough that the passion takes over and you can talk about the idea with a kind of enthusiasm. But for me, it's a different kind of thing. The problem I usually have when I start is I've got 10 places that I want to start. I mean, I think on any promotion, I could write like 5 leads. Now, I'm like, this would be a great opening story, or, maybe I should start it with this statistic or start it with here. So for me, I have to write them all. I have to write most of them. And then hopefully I lose the stamina to do the other ones, because I know I'm going to have to throw them away. And then if I can, I have somebody who I trust to say, listen, this is probably the one I'd like to open with, but what do you think of these? I just turned something in yesterday with 12 alternate landing pages, but I would never turn that into the editorial team to review. I turned it into the person who reviews the copy and say, look, let's just pick a couple of these. Maybe we can test, but do you like any of them? Because right now I like all of them. I know that a few days will go by and I won't like them. So I guess that's another tip too. Just create it and then go back to it and see how you feel after the shine is gone off the process and you're just looking at the raw material.
I wonder, right, Glenn, who is the author a fiction author who said something along the lines of just write one true sentence? Who said that?
Hemingway. That's Hemingway.
Hemingway. Okay, so you look confused then, as if you were thinking,
Hemingway,
me?
yeah.
I've never read a book. I don't spend my life talking about fiction. I think there's an element.
He's traumatized because Paul Auster just died.
He did what?
I
No,
know, yeah.
he didn't.
He did.
Glenn,
He died today as we were recording this.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that's terrible. I sorry, I didn't realize that.
He's dying right now.
Well, as we all
Yes, he's grieving.
Live.
We go.
Live
I finished with that thought, but it did make me think of something. So Hemingway said that one true sentence.
I do think there's an element of that that's true with copy, where when you find the right opening line, not the best copy line, but just the right one, it naturally, the true one, the true statement, it naturally, there's a follow-on line and a follow-on line, and there's a momentum. It creates a momentum in the writing process that not every line that you then write ends up in the final draft, but I think often a large proportion of that ends up as the spine of your lead. And that's a different thing to finding the right opening line, the sort of jazzy opening line, the spectacular opening line. So that's what we try and write, something spectacular. But actually, we just need to find that thing that is natural and naturally takes us to the next place. I think that's what's really, really difficult to do, to get into that mode of thinking.
Yeah, I think there's another analogy there that's in fiction writing. I mean, one of the things that people tell you when you're writing copy is that don't try to be literary, don't think like you're a fiction writer and all the other stuff. And we're not supposed to be trying to be artsy, because we don't want people to look at the writing and say, that's good writing. What we want people to say is, that's a great product. That's a great, message or something. So, but that said, just about everybody that I know who's a copywriter has an interest in fiction. I know you guys do. I do. I love movies, scripts. I love, and if it's not fiction and movies, it's usually history, great writing about history and stuff. So I think it's okay for us to make analogies to fiction writing. And there's another writer, William Styron. William Styron, he did Sophie's Choice, Revenge of Nat Turner, and some other stuff. He struggled with depression. I think he's still alive. I'm not sure, but he wrote a book about his own depression called Darkness Visible, and in that he was talking about how writing was part of that experience for him. And he said there are two kinds of writers. There are writers that begin and flow and just write everything real fast, and then they go back and they clean it up. Then there are writers that go through and they write a sentence and they rewrite that sentence until it's good, and then they write the next sentence and they rewrite that sentence until it's good. And he said, the people who write the second way hate their lives. And I'm the kind of writer who writes the second way. So Hemingway was also a meticulous word by word by word, and maybe it's no accident that he ended up shooting himself. So, I don't know. I think the longer I've gotten into this career,
too far into the death.
What's that? Say that again.
I was going to say you carry on your thought, John, but I'll bring the death party over in a minute.
The longer that I'm doing this, the less meticulous, I guess, the less sentimental I get about turning a good phrase. I'd much rather, in fact, I just prior to this had a call with a junior copywriter. I'm going to start a new project. And I was asking her how she has worked with other senior copywriters on doing stuff and what the process was. I said, because I'm going to try and do something different from what I usually do, which is I usually research before I write anything. I think that this time around, I'm going to write before I know anything. I'm going to flip it around, and I'm going to write what I want to say. And then I'm going to go in and bring it back by filling in holes and rethinking, because I want to get the bones down because of the speed, I think. Not just because I want to get the project done quickly, but because I think when you write that way, you get the momentum comes out in the reading. So when somebody reads it, they also feel like they have a speedy experience. They get the passion, they get the momentum. I think that's kind of like what you were saying, Nick, about that, the line, how the line, you write a good line and it feeds kind of the next line. Like you pick up pace and pretty soon you kind of get lost in the flow.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you're saying, but I like the flow. I think that flow thing is so key, and it is actually what makes the job more enjoyable. So
I think it's so.
I,
what a great topic, by the way.
Going to add to the
death. He wants to talk about death.
Yeah, he wants to talk about death. Go on, Glenn. You have.
Yeah, I was going to add to the thing. My internet's not working very well, but I was just going to add Paul Auster, who has died today as we are recording this. Who people will know I was a big fan of. He wrote in that second way that you suggest, John, that he would go through each sentence and then reread that sentence and move on to the next sentence and construct paragraphs that way. And I, for a long time, thought that was kind of mimic that as a style. I thought it lent itself to how you might write a song, because when you're writing a song, you'll play the riff and then you'll go back to the top of the song and let the riff flow on. However, I've realized I think there's the best or the most practical way is finding a balance between the two approaches, because I think even if you write like that, what you're talking about of like, where do you enter a promotion, where do you enter the right moment of a story, I would probably still dare say that Paul Auster or Steyer and whoever's doing it would still go back and do another edit of that book, that novel, or if you thought you'd done a lead well and Bill's knocking 6 pages off it, it's still going to be deleted. And I think that the fact that the way you have obviously now got to the point where you will have all of these ideas, I don't think there is a way to avoid having to write all of that stuff. You have to get it down on the page. And I think I'm realizing that more and more, and how much editing really is. I know it's a bit of a cliche, a truism, but editing is writing. Like without being the discipline to go back to see, all right, actually, I need to delete that, get in earlier, kill your darlings, all that kind of stuff. You've got to be able to do that. And that is as much as important as actually finding the right place to enter. You've got to have that discipline to go back and to let the other person have the best idea. They might see a better place for you to enter your copy, kind of thing. I think it's valuable, but you've got to find a balance, I guess. You've got to start somewhere. But...
Yeah, I think that actually raises an important point too, because, and this is another good analogy from other creative venues, having somebody, all the not the beat writers, but the Paris generation of writers, Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Gertrude Stein, all those other people, they all had, just for some reason it's slipping my mind right now, but the editor, there was an editor who was their point person in the publishing world. Max Perkins. So Max Perkins,
Max Perkins,
that's his name, and he would, they would turn their stuff over to him. They said that, like for instance, Fitzgerald, he would misspell every other word. He was terrible about that stuff, but Perkins would read his stuff not just to find spelling and clean it up, but as a real thought editor. He would go in and say, this long section here in the book, I think it takes away from Gatsby's story, or maybe you need to focus more on this. And, when you see the book on the bookshelf or on reading lists for kids at school and stuff, it doesn't say The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald and Max Perkins. It just says Fitzgerald, but he couldn't have done it without Perkins there. And I think even, we're not writing, again, great literature, we're just writing promotional copy, but having somebody who's got that kind of insight to look at what you've done and help you reshape it is huge. I think everybody who writes copy, pretty much, I'm sure, has somebody that there's a go-to person that kind of speeds them along in shaping the idea after it's been laid out on the page.
I wonder, John, have you found as your career has gone on that you've internalized people's voices? So, for instance, you were talking about Bill. You write something without sending it to them. You think, oh, I can hear what Bill will think of this. It's like you have this coterie of editors in your brain. Like there's usually sort of 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Like I've definitely had Glenn stuck in my head at some point in time, probably in the earlier part of my career, and I'd hear him, oh, Glenn will say this to that. And I think it's very difficult actually to get to that point where you're able to synthesize all that stuff and let your own copy come through, because it can feel a little bit paralyzing in some ways, living in your own head with it all, you know?
Yeah. I think that's, though, a good argument for this idea of getting it onto the page, because if the voices are happening as you're writing, that's paralyzing, because you're in the middle of making choices and people are leaning over your shoulder, giving you more choices. I mean, I don't like to write with my screen open for viewing. I like to, have it up against the wall. So I'm the only one that knows what's happening there. It just helps me focus. But once you put it on a page and you send it to somebody, as soon as you send it, make sure you go do something where you can chill out, because that's an open time. It's like, I just hit the ball back in your court. And then when they send it back, the voices happen later, So yeah, I do hear some of those voices, but I try to ignore them. Right now, I write stuff sort of without shame. It's like you're writing it, it's like writing in a journal. You're like, this is my journal, so I can say anything I want. I think it's just me and the idea when I'm writing. And then try to see later when somebody who I respect likes the idea.
I like that reminded me, just while we're on literary pretentious references, I'm going to cite Philip Roth, but this is, my old line used to be a Hemingway one about like writing that one true sentence, which I never really truly understood. I never kind of got that, and I have later in life. But Philip Roth said to let the repellent out. And he meant it in the regards to like writing freely and saying what you really think and really like expressing yourself, and not like, as you say, like writing without embarrassment, like getting everything out on the page. And I think that's, I mean, you look at his early work like Portnoy's Complaint and stuff like that, that's where the repellent comes out, and then you can go to like Sabbath Theatre and it's like insanely horrible. But that idea turned over to the copy side of things. I think being able to write whatever, like to write freely and write openly and to like put something weird and wonderful and like an interpretation or something. I think that you haven't got to, sorry, but I think doing that and writing with that confidence, knowing, for example, if I sent that thing to Nick, he'd go, yeah, that's great, or that's weird. But he's not going to judge me for it. He's just going to go, yeah, that idea doesn't work, kind of thing, and creating that mindset where I'm just going to write the strangest, weirdest things and let that stuff out. I think that's quite an important element. It sounds like you've got to that as well, where it's not so much letting the repellent out in the copy thing, but writing without embarrassment and not worrying, not thinking, oh, they're going to, I guess what it's not thinking the review is going to be a personal attack on your personality. We're always trying to make the copy stronger, and you've got to be open to that idea. I think that's like fundamental to being good at copy.
No, I mean, it's crazy. I'm sure it's the same it is the same in every other field. You see like an artist gets put, I keep talking about artists, but artists get put out in the front, and they're the great part of what they do, but the cast of characters behind the scenes is immense. And now in copy, that's, especially since the production values have kicked up and we have VSLs and all the other stuff, the I guess to me, that's the most paralyzing thought is, you're going to write some duds every now and then, maybe more often than every now and then. And there are so many people's effort and time now that goes into getting something out. And I feel a lot of responsibility for their time because there are production crews and film crews and people who do the editing, the legal review, the people who do the design on all your charts and all the other stuff. Yeah, so I don't know exactly how I get to that from what you were saying, except that it's essential to have a good relationship and to be comfortable with the input of many.
This is, I think, so this is our 100th episode, okay? And I'm just gonna check off some of the stuff that we've covered already. So we've covered the death of Paul Auster, suicide of Ernest Hemingway. We've compared ourselves indirectly to multiple famous artists and musicians.
The only thing it's missing is pints of beer. We really should be doing this in a bar.
But what I would say is, I think, if you look back through the 100 episodes that we've done, this is not our last episode by any means, but that's actually been a consistent theme, which is we've always tried to stay away from the idea that copy is mechanical and systemizable. Not only because I don't think it is, but also because it robs the entire profession of its fun and the artistry that is there, or the craftsmanship maybe is the better word. And I think there's probably 100,000 copywriters out there who have clicked on this video or this link on Spotify or whatever, thinking, oh, let's hear what John Forde has to say. And the vast majority of people probably are turned off by the idea of copy as art or something that can't be shortcut and things like that, because I think people want to shortcut these days. Sure. What we're left with now is the legends only, the people who understand what copywriting is really about. So welcome everyone, if you're still with us after the art fest. We'll try and get back to the craft of copywriting, but I think it's entirely legitimate to compare copy to any other form of written art or whatever, or any other form of writing, whether it's music or otherwise, because I think there are more similarities than there are differences.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also a very important part of the conversation that's happening right now about this whole industry and the thing that you guys will be covering in that thing this summer about AI, because people are trying to figure out how to use AI. And they're kind of going into it, some begrudgingly, some enthusiastically, about what AI means for writing copy. And some of them are looking for that shortcut. They're looking for the formula so that AI can do it for them. And it's now pushing a button. There are a lot of push button things that AI does bring to this business. But the thing I think it still doesn't bring, and I doubt that it will bring even in the greater iterations of ChatGPT and all the other stuff, is this thing that you discover that it really isn't something you can do by formula, that everybody can take the same formula and get the same result. It's, for years I taught these writing boot camps. I went on these writing boot camps, and I did some things with the AWAI folks in Florida, and I would prepare all kinds of secrets and tips and tricks. And, Bill Bonner and I used to do presentations with those, and Mark Forde used to do presentations with those. But as the years went on, I became less and less interested in presenting tips and more interested in getting as quickly as I could to pieces of writing that somebody had brought so we could pick them apart and make them better. And the reason for that was, all the time that I was giving the tips and tricks, I was thinking that in the background, really what we're trying to do when we're making a sales pitch is not unlike a human interaction, a relationship that's either new or ongoing, and you're trying to speak to that relationship. So, and and we all, no matter what you do, we all hopefully have some kinds of relationships in our lives with family, friends, loved one, spouse, or kids, and that you can't put a relationship on autopilot. You have to keep revisiting it, and it's the abstractions that make the difference. How you handle the abstractions that make the difference. I think that's the same thing in copy. So what copy really is figuring out, how do I talk to a stranger in a really friendly and amiable way that they're going to be like, okay, you're credible to me. You're credible to me because of your credentials, but you're also credible because you sound like a real person who's talking. And I think you can only get to that by understanding that there are tips and tricks. So, the people who are listening to this on Spotify, I think for the ones who are like, oh man, I just want the 10 best ways to write a subject line or something like that. I would say, okay, well, try it. Try writing copy for a while and you'll discover the same thing, that you'll come up empty if all you're doing is following a formula.
Amen.
It's not easy to sell that idea because, like you said, but people don't want that. But it's like selling a diet plan. When you say, it comes down to the end at the end of the day, you can put 30 successful or famous diets on the page and then say, scientifically, what's the mechanism at work here? Reducing calories, increasing your calorie burn. Every single one of them. And that's kind of true here too. All the tips and tricks and courses, and whether they're all going to come back down to this point.
Yeah, effectively, we can probably boil most things down to 2 points. Having something worthwhile to say to your prospect and being able to say it in a way that doesn't feel cringe. I mean, if we're getting really blunt, one major advantage experienced copywriters have, I would say, is we've sort of found our voice, our copy voice.
Right.
I mean, you mentioned the boot camps you used to run, John. I mean, Glenn and I both learned to write copy that way. And one of the things that was always obvious in part of those reviews was that you would usually do this, but Bill would do it too. We'd be reviewing some copy and it'd be that moment where somebody would say, what if? And then they sort of like look, sort of up there somewhere. And then they just start saying copy. They just say, well, I said it like this. And it would da-dum, 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 da-dum. And it's that you found your voice when you can do that, right? You're not having to think about how you say it. You're just saying it. It's just coming out naturally. And once you fuse those two things together, you've kind of cracked it. And you won't get everything right every time. Nobody will, but you'll get it right more often. You'll get it right often enough to succeed. It's just it's very, very hard to learn both of those skills.
I think it comes back as well. I was thinking this before you were saying that, and also, but when I think back to seeing like John and Bill do that what if experiment, and what you're doing while you're pausing, the old what if it did this? What you're really doing and what we're doing, we do it now ourselves, and you're stalling for time. And why are you stalling for time? Because you're thinking, do I understand what I'm selling? And I think that is, when you said, Nick, about the two things, it needs to be not cringe, that's fine. But I think I've thought about this more and more these days, but you have to understand what you're selling. That's really hard. It's also made hard by your own self-discipline to like truly understand the idea that you are writing about. But also you're probably, in most cases, surrounded, before you even get to the reader, you are surrounded by this is not derogatory towards marketers, but marketers, compliance officers, CEOs, account managers, whoever it may be, a whole plethora of business people around you who probably aren't going to spend as much time as you are as the copywriter understanding the idea and trying to find what really makes that worth talking about. Therefore, you have this duality where you've got to convince the business side, then you've got to, only then can you start like speaking to the reader in an engaging, non-cringy way. But because that is such a hard thing to do, to actually understand an idea, then persuade everybody else the idea, that's the idea you should be talking about. To then write in an engaging way, it's like oh, I'm knackered now. I'll just shit out this copy kind of thing. Whereas it's actually understanding the idea is the hardest part, and that's when we go, what if it was? And what your mind's doing is go, let me make sure I understand this. And I don't think copywriters spend as much time understanding what they want to say as they probably should, in my experience. But watching the world, I feel like that's what, John, you're a famously effective researcher, and you've always dug down into that idea. I know, Nick, you're a similar, you take a similar approach, and I think that's what gives you that depth of knowledge and understanding to then be able to write in a much freer and non-cringy way.
Well, I think I like the word cringe right after the AI conversation, because I think in a way AI is a cringe machine. I mean, it's so good at writing cringy copy. That's what it does. But about understanding the idea and the what if, I mean, we're even now, I see Nick is like looking up in the corner. I'm looking up in the corner. There's nothing that I'm looking at. I'm actually looking at a gray patch of sky. I think not just stalling for an idea, but it's also kind of giving yourself over to a part of the process that comes from the understanding. So people talk about people will talk about having writer's block or being frustrated, that feeling like I can't do it, I don't get it. I mean, I do a lot of research, but the reason I do a lot of research is because I am worried I am not smart enough to write about the thing I'm writing about. I'm worried that I will sound like an idiot. That's when I'm doing the research, I'm like, I have to reduce my idiot score in order to start. But I pour all that stuff in, and there's kind of like a wave of feelings, a cycle of feelings that happen while you're doing all that stuff. I don't know where to begin. I have so many tabs open, my browser is choking, and I'm getting memory messages where I got to shut some things down. I read the same idea 10 different ways in 10 different articles and take notes, and it's very messy. And I think during that phase, I am not going to be able to wrestle this idea to the ground. When you get to the what if stage, though, and it happens faster when you're reviewing somebody else's copy because they've done all that groundwork, and now you're helping them gel it together. It's almost like when you say the what if and you look up in the corner, something happens and it takes over, and you go into like a flowing state where you don't even, sometimes when you do the what if and you look in the corner, you don't know what's going to come, but it gets there anyway. I mean, I think that when you're writing, that's the thing too. Like you don't really know how you understand it. And then you're writing it and you're like, gee, I didn't know I thought that. I mean, and here it is on the page, and it's like, you see it coming together. I think it's interesting too, because Nick, you said before about that idea of the fun of the process. That is, to me, the moment that you get that what if feeling, that's where the fun comes in. You're like, who would have thought I would really enjoy writing about debt to GDP ratios for, 4 hours or something like that?
Well, it also, it comes back to the, you used the word natural earlier when we were talking about first lines, but it's natural. It starts to just flow. The next line, you don't have to think about it because it's obvious what the next line of copy will be from the previous line. I'm not a musician, both of you are, but I imagine music is to say, well, if I've gone here, I have to go. That's where you go.
The blue note, you can feel it. You can feel it coming.
Yeah, it's natural. So I think that's what you're searching for. But I also think that's what, if we can do one thing as the fix, it's to try and get that across to people, because so much copywriting advice leans towards the unnatural, the mechanistic, the systemizable, the cringe, whatever you want to, whatever term you want to use, it actually forces people to write in a way that is unnatural or that's confected or that's, and that, I think that's one of the worst aspects of the copywriting industry. Actually, it's good, you know, based on the copy we receive or I review and stuff like that. There's lots of people who are still looking at it the wrong way, and if we can just get people to think and write naturally, then you are a lot closer to being successful. Just on the research thing, I think the golden ratio is you should spend twice as much time researching as you do reading existing copy. Whatever that ratio is for you. If you read tons of existing copy, you need to do twice as much research. If you don't read ever so much existing copy, then maybe less research, just to get the balance in the voice right. Because I think it's really obvious when someone spends far more time reviewing existing copy than they do looking at the world and reading other writers and reading nonfiction. I think the copy comes out unnatural. Then it's a weird hall of mirrors to be in. So that's something I would recommend people do. Whatever that is, it's like a cup making. You can season it, you can use it in whatever volume you want, but it should be about 2-to-1, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I want to, because I said earlier that I'm kind of going to try to switch over to writing before I know anything. And getting bones down on the page. I think that ratio still applies, because you end up having to do, even if you're doing it during the editing process, you still have to do a ton of research, and it does change what you say. I just think it's easy to get into this phase where you're like, I'll just keep researching, and it becomes a procrastination method. But that in no way denigrates the idea that you need to do a lot of research, because you need to have something to talk about. It's not enough just to talk, boy, he talks real pretty, but I mean, what if you're not saying anything? It doesn't matter. So, and again, I think it points back to the AI thing. The only reason that AI is so much a story now, even though people have been trying to simulate human conversation with computers for decades, is because somebody figured out how to teach the AI thing to read, to do a lot of to research quickly. So it's not about teaching something to sound human. It's about teaching something to be smart and then sound human. So
on that, we should mention briefly that if you want to hear John talk about AI and all things connected to AI and copywriting, make sure you join us for Fix Fest this year, 3rd of July in London. We'll talk about this plus a million other things in the pub afterwards. John, I had a question for you, which is, so, I mean, you've been in the industry for, I don't know how long, I don't know how many decades, a lot longer than I have, 30 odd years, 30 something years.
30 cents, yeah, 30 something.
So how have you maintained your ability to come at things in a fresh way? Because you're definitely not somebody that has a system or a formula that you just repeat over and over and over. And you definitely still a writer's writer. You like the art of it. You like the ideas. You're still enthusiastic for it. That's fairly uncommon in our industry. People tend to burn out or get one-tracked. How have you managed to keep things fresh for yourself?
I think part of it comes from just a personality that tends to be attracted to this business, which I know we said this old David Ogilvy thing about that the number one thing that he used to look for in copywriters when he hired them was curiosity. And that, I don't know if curiosity can be taught. It's an attitude that helps you overcome weariness, that helps you overcome cynicism. Because if you are innately curious, you really can't resist opening the next box to see what's inside. So I think that does help. I'm just a person who's curious, even curious, I think, to a fault, because I find it hard. Every idea sounds appealing to me. So I'm not a good editor sometimes of the ideas that I come across, because they're all kind of interesting. I kind of get in them. And to me, that's part of the fun of this business, is learning stuff. So that definitely helps. I think, every now and then, if you have a success, that helps. It's nice to have money. I think it also helps to run into other people. I think we feed off of each other. When you run into people who are excited by ideas, that's infectious, and it keeps you going. So I think we're lucky to be around a lot of smart people who have interesting spins on things. So that keeps it going. I think there's been a kind of a steady flow of that.
That is true. Certainly, as copywriters, we're nothing if not interesting. I mean, I would describe most of the copywriters I know as a bunch of complete weirdos, but lovable. And then, we're all weird in our own. Yeah,
lovable weirdos, among which there are a lot of people that play instruments, most of which who drink too much, and a lot of them have pretty good sense of humor. I mean, that's
I think that's fair. Like, even the seemingly normal ones, the people who seem completely on the level, eventually they do something where it's like, oh, that's your thing. That's your obsession. It's history. You've just spent, 15 hours plodding around London looking at landmarks. That I just had to get to this point to realize that's how you're strange. Like, strangeness and being interesting are kind of two sides of the same coin. So I do think that is a big part of what makes it invigorating for us. And I think you're right. I actually think curiosity is the defining factor in success and longevity. But I think the sort of coda to it is most people aren't half as curious as they say they are. You work with a new writer and they say, I'm super curious. And then you look at the copy and you say, so where's this company based? And they go, oh, I don't know.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. You don't know. That's good, isn't it? You don't know something. Like, sure, I thought you were the curious one. So I think actually you got to look yourself in the mirror and say, am I maxing? Am I 10xing, Glenn, my curiosity?
And
it's a natural.
I benefit from a delayed internet connection on the basis that I can't say a stupid thing after everything that John says, which I normally would have attempted, but for the quality of the interview, I've avoided that. But yeah, I mean, it is. You say about being curious. I wanted to make a joke when you said you were curious to a fault, John. That you were like some kind of cat burglar just going into people's houses and you're too curious. But I think that is like, you've got to look at the world and just, I think on as another coda to curiosity, this is a little bit waffy, but I think you've got to have a bit of a wonder for the world. You've got to have a bit of a wonder. Like, it's more than just curiosity. You've got to be like, wow, that's amazing. Like, it's not
you need
just
to be easily impressed.
You've got to be like, wow, that's really cool. And that usually does come down to being weird, because most people go, yeah, so what? We're like, no, isn't that like that's amazing that gold does that, or oil does this, or when interest rates do X, something else does Y, or that happens. Even banal things, you've got to have this sense of when you follow your curiosity. I feel like actually it's not just enough to go, I know that, oh, that's really interesting, tell me more. It's then going, wow, like that's really interesting. And having that wonder is, again, it's something that's the payoff for being so curious and for doing all that work, because you're like, oh, right, that's really cool. Like, I didn't realize that. So I think that it's worth mentioning, that kind of having that sense of wonder at the world, because that's what kind of inspires and keeps in a what's the right word, like a good positive feedback loop. The more curiosity comes from wonder, and you go, all right, wow, I didn't realize that, and now I can keep going, and having that kind of constant loop is important.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think it's true in the sense that you think about persuasion, um, persuasion is, as we often say amongst copywriters, and that persuasion is not about making somebody believe something they don't believe. It's about finding something that they believed and increasing the energy that's within them about that thing, and drawing them to something. But so if persuasion is overcoming inertia, it's not so much about pushing somebody towards something, but really intriguing them, drawing them forward. And that enthusiasm about something that you know that they'll care about, when you're kind of that beam of light about that idea, when you've kind of lit up about it, they're attracted to it. And you're right, it's not just about being curious, but it's about being able to get excited about stuff, which kind of just happens. You can't decide to be excited. You find yourself excited. So, yeah, I think that's important.
I guess the advice to people is to find it's to research and to be curious until you find what excites you. When you're excited, then you will be able to write in an engaging and exciting way and not write in the cringy way. So
right.
It's a bit of a long rounded tip, but it is just keep looking until something gets you and feeling wonder and go, that's the bit I should lead into. And that will give you an authentic voice for free when you come to actually write about it. And you'll be able to write the one true sentence about it, kind of thing, without being too tenuous.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of a thing. See, I'm getting excited. That's why I'm talking over you. Steve Jobs said that thing about the iPod when it was first introduced. Microsoft had the Zune, I think even around the same time, or maybe even before. I can't remember which one came first, but there was a thing that was going around on the internet, and it was talking about the Zune, and they had this is what a marketing meeting does, and all this input about how the Zune should be, and the box had all these things they showed in real time, animated, adding these bullet points to the box for the Zune. It can do this, this, and this, and then adding these features and that features, and it just was weighed down with somebody trying to make it I'm going to make this really appealing. And then somebody asked Steve Jobs, and why did this iPod succeed and the Zune, which had more features, not succeed? And he said, well, it was really simple, actually. It's just, we love music. So we made the device that we would love to have. And one of us was sitting around, and somebody said, it would be cool if I could just carry, he was talking about Bob Dylan, I think, or the Beatles. And he's like, he said, I love Bob Dylan. And, I have to, it sucks that I have to decide which album I want to listen to. I'd love to be able to just carry his whole catalog in my pocket, 5,000 songs in my pocket. Somebody said, now that's an idea. And he said, so, that's what it came down to. We love music. So we've created the thing we love. And I think it's the same kind of thing. If you can get excited about an idea, and it's legitimately exciting, and it's quality, it becomes easy to sell. I think that's why that's an important point too, because I think, copywriters ask, how can I sell this? We write for the financial industry, and this thing has a terrible track record, whatever. And my answer to somebody was well, that's a project you should turn down, because how can you write about it if it's not legit? Part of what we do is we help shape the product by making it better. So,
if I was sort of trying to summarize what we're talking about, it's actually the extent to which copywriting it's a deeply internal process. You have to sell yourself, get yourself excited. Your own curiosity drives things, your own sense of wonder, your own natural writing voice that's going to come across and embrace the reader. And I think that is it's a useful way to think. It's a useful framework for thinking, because it's very easy in our industry to look out at what's out there in the market, other copywriters, other products, other stuff, and to get stuck in a bit of a hall of mirrors if they're doing this and they're doing this and they're doing this and such wrote it like that. And that's great. Some of that intelligence is useful, and we shouldn't, if you're completely outside the industry, you probably feel, like you'd love a bit of that. But ultimately, you have to go to that part of yourself where you find the thing that you're going to say, the way of saying things, the idea, the expression that you can come up with that nobody else is going to come up with. Not your writing partner, not your publisher, not the editor. It's this is why copywriting at the very, very high levels is extremely well paid, because that's a skill not many people have. It's a place not many people are willing to go to. The Microsoft example you gave, that's a great example of writing by committee. Let's just make it really logical, really think about the best ways in. We'll all pitch in. Great copywriting is often much more inspirational and much more personal, and then it grows from there. And I think that can be terrifying or it can be liberating, but either way, it's true.
Agreed.
Fact.
Truth.
Fact. Truth.
Big. Yeah, it should have a big stamp that comes onto the screen. Goes, yes.
Here's what I found.
My
Uh-oh, AI is kicking in. I agree too.
Yeah. They found me 15% off on eBay. Like that's what they offered me to the fact and truth. I've got some discounted facts that I can buy.
Well, I'm going to say that some of the sublime's ridiculous there.
That sounds like a good storefront somewhere. Discounted facts. They're true. They're just not that interesting.
Cheap truth.
No one wants him. No one wants him. It's a fact. It's a fact that's been left out in the cold. It's been marked down, and still nobody wants to take it home. Right, gentlemen. I think this is the universe telling us that this conversation has run its course. John, thank you for gracing us with your presence in our 100th episode. You were the only person we could ask to come and raise your bat with us for 100 episodes. So thank you very much for giving us some of your time, mate.
It's always fun.
And final reminder, everybody, if you want to come and hang out with the three of us, hear us all speak about copywriting, AI, and anything else you want to hear us talk about this summer, we're all speaking at FixFest 2, AI or Die, which is on the 3rd of July in central London. Glenn will look after links, various other press cuttings regarding that. But come along. It's going to be great. And we'll continue this conversation one way or another then.
In the boudoir. If you enjoy The Fix and want to get access to even more good stuff, join the Fix Accelerator today. Get access to special masterclasses from Nick and me, watch expert interviews with industry legends, join live copy feedback sessions every week, and get connected to our very own private copy network. Visit thefixaccelerator.com for more information.